But they're everywhere. They're outside and they're inside. Most houses have their own little family of geckos. Like my geckos, I don't think they ever really went outside because they had a pretty nice inside. And they would come and keep me company. They run across the walls. They would chase each other sometimes. And recently, right before I left, it was baby season, so I had little baby geckos running around. They were very cute. In fact, I had to be careful I didn't step on them as I walked through the house. Animals. While we're talking about animals, they're not, they're Muslim. They don't eat pork. Does anybody here of Muslim faith or speak Urdu? Anybody have any Pakistani or Muslim roots? But pork is not eaten. Although there are wild boars that run freely around the country. In Islamabad, sometimes you would see them walking across the street, a whole family of wild boars. And I would see them in the stream sometimes, just cooling off. Monkeys. You've all seen on Discovery Channel or somewhere about the monkeys in India. Have you seen these? It's the same thing there, here. The monkeys do live there. The base of the hill. Margala Hills is facing on the northwestern part of the city, and they live in the hills and they come down. They know that humans throw good things in the trash. Okay, so you can often see them at dusk at trash cans around the city. And some of the people were foolish enough to feed them. So guess what happened? We had. If you're there for a year, you get 2 breaks because you really need to get out and chill out for a little bit. So when these people that were feeding them, they left the city, and the monkeys were mad because they weren't there to feed. They broke into the house. The monkeys broke into the house. Okay, so you can imagine what they found when they came home. So, I like the monkeys are very cute. I think I have a picture. I can show you some of the monkey pictures. But there are monkeys that roam through there. There are the goats and the cows and the water buffalo roam freely because it's dry for long periods of time. Grass, the animals have to find grazing where they can. So animals roam freely. They're not branded. Everybody knows which animals belong to whom. Okay, there isn't any need for that. It's kind of interesting. But often I would drive, and on the way into work, I'd see this little batch of cows walking down the medial strip. And these are big highways in Florida. They're walking down the medial strip to their favorite grazing ground. And at night, you can see them walking home. And so and the goats run freely. I have to be careful not to hit goats often as I was going into work. And also I would see the I love donkeys. Donkeys are one of my favorite animals. So I would see the donkeys coming down Jenna Avenue, 1, 2, 3, 8 lanes, 4 lanes each way, highway, big street. And there comes the guys riding their donkeys into work, the construction workers coming in. So it's kind of charming. It's kind of very charming to see that kind of thing. I think do you have any questions about life there? Is there anything I haven't said that you're interested in? Yes.
Did you ever feel threatened or unsafe?
That's a good question. Actually, I did not. Not in Islamabad, and even on the few excursions that we went to. I would dress in a way that it wasn't conspicuous. Like I would wear this. This is one of the things that I would wear. The dress, Muslim dress, is basically it's covering the woman's area, crotch area. Basically, is what they seek to do with their clothing, and men as well. That's the whole idea of the design of the clothing. So if you were relatively covered, I look Western. There's no way I'm going to look Pakistani unless I cover myself up totally. So people do stare at you. So if you're uncomfortable with that, you might feel unsafe. Although I knew that I was different, so I would definitely, I would attract attention. But I didn't feel threatened because of it, because it was just purely benign curiosity. Mm-hmm. But as far as my life, I really didn't. They warned us about that. They said, do not become complacent. I know you might feel safe, but it just takes that 1 second of somebody with a bomb strapped to them to walk into the market where you are and blow the place up. Okay, so they warned us about that. They said, don't drive to work the same route every day. Don't leave your house at the same time every day. Don't be predictable. So that's what we had to do. Those of us with our own cars especially, we have to be especially careful. Because it's really easy to get in the routine and leave the house at the same time every day and go the same way. Especially, I was right there on the main road. It was really convenient for me, but you have to mix it up.
Did you have certain routes that you had to take? And were some routes off limits, and were there some places that you couldn't go?
That's a good question. Yeah, there were, as you notice from the map, it's limited. There aren't that many streets. So there really wasn't any place within the main areas that they said you can't go. But if they knew of a demonstration, they would text us and say, avoid Kashmir Highway or Margala Hills. Yeah, so we would get warnings if that were the case. But other than that, everything was open. Yeah, good question. Yes, sir.
At home, did you have any access to American media or Western media of any kind?
No, we did not. It was interesting, when Hillary Clinton came, when Secretary Clinton came, a whole entourage of press people came, and they did stay on the compound. And they warned us, they said, if you're walking around and people start asking you questions, just be very aware that the press might, just be careful and to be careful in what you say to the press. So we were warned about that pretty much. Sorry, I know you're press guy. Because it would be easy to say something very innocently that could be taken in the wrong way or misinterpreted. So they warned us to be careful about that. Not so much the American press. I mean, we didn't see them too much. They weren't there that often. The Pakistani press, we really had to be careful of because they don't always write about Americans in a very flattering light. So they were especially, because Secretary Clinton, during her visit in October, invited the Pakistani press onto the compound to dispel some of the misleading statements that they had been printing about us. And so, but no, we really didn't see too many of them. Yes, sir?
Did you have internet there?
Yes.
So you could get internet news?
Yes. The internet there is not the greatest, but it was relatively okay. Like Jeff and I would Skype whenever we could, but it was it's not a very strong internet, but it is there.
I would think you might want to let them know what shows you watched on TV, which shows you were not allowed to watch on TV because there's barriers that they can't get.
Oh, yeah, in general, I mean, I chose not to get cable service because I wasn't home very much. We worked long hours, and when I was at home, I really didn't have the time or the energy to watch TV. I watched a lot of my news online, because you can watch a lot of the stuff, the talk shows, the Meet the Press, PBS, you can watch all of that online. But certain shows, you can watch all of the major network news online. Certain websites, however, if you were out of the U.S., you could not access. They wouldn't let you play it out of the U.S. So there were certain things I couldn't watch online. But I could see enough. There's enough news and various things of all sorts. I mean, of all political persuasions. Most of us work with the State Department. You become very apolitical because you become just allergic to the bickering. So we become very apolitical and just don't want to hear it. So, but we could get as much of that as we wanted and just see all sides of the issue, how people were talking about it. Does that answer your question? Anybody else have a question? Yes, ma'am.
Could you give an example of a website you were not committed to?
Yeah, what show was it? Oh yeah, I happen to be a very big Donald Trump fan. Okay, so I wanted to watch The Apprentice, Celebrity Apprentice. And NBC, even though I could watch their nightly news online, I could not watch The Apprentice online. But I could watch it on the compound because when we got into work and logged into our computers, the IP address was a U.S. IP address, so the computer thought I was in the U.S. So I would go into work at 4:30 in the morning. I'm not kidding you. Because I wanted to watch Donald Trump. So I would go in very early and watch The Apprentice at work because it thought it was a U.S. computer. And I mean, it is a U.S. computer, but I wasn't in the U.S. Okay. Anybody else have a question? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that people would stare at you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got a lot of different countries,
Mm-hmm.
but the people there are Muslim, right?
Yeah, most of them are. 95%.
Okay, so what I'm getting around to is, did people stare at you? Did you feel that they were looking at you like you're not dressed properly, you need to get your head covered? Or were they just going, my gosh, look at her? Yeah, what were they?
Well,
How was that?
that's a good question, and it did vary. Some of the older women, like Jeff noticed, what he called disapproving looks. But they're not blatant about it. I mean, it's in the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the stares were from Pakistani men who were not, they weren't working at the embassy or anything. But people they were used to Westerners, but just regular Pakistani men, and they would just look. And I guess like a benign curiosity. They would just stare in a very passive way, very passive. But some of the older women might be disapproving. But there are so many Westerners in Islamabad itself.
Yeah.
And Pakistan is not one country where you have to cover your head. It's a secular government. So women dress as conservative or as unconservative as they see fit. It's really a personal choice in Pakistan. A lot of the younger women are wearing Western clothes, jeans, and they're still wearing the tunics. Again, they wear the long tops. They do that. But, women, during Ramadan, my Uzma is a very good friend of mine. I learned a lot about Islam from her. I was very curious, and she was gracious enough to answer mine and Jeff's questions, so I learned quite a bit from her. But during Ramadan, she does cover her hair. She's beautiful. She's long, beautiful hair. But during Ramadan, she's very, very religious. But she's the most kind, generous person I've ever met. And during Ramadan, she does dress very conservatively. But once that's over, she's back. And it's interesting. The women get around. They get around it. The women, especially the women I worked with, their clothes they reveal their forms because you can get it tailored. And these women are beautiful. They're just absolutely beautiful. And they would wear the low necks and everything. So it was kind of fun to watch how they would push the envelope a little bit as far as the dress went. Yes, sir.
When you did have time off, which I assume you did, would you feel safe venturing out of, getting out into the country, driving around?
Yeah.
I mean, outside of town.
That's a good question. In order to do that, the first thing we had to do was get permission. We had to tell the RSO where we wanted to go, and it was a male while I was there, so he or his staff would have to approve it. So, and we did do that. I can share with you a couple places that we went.
But they have to know where you are pretty
They
much.
have to know where you are, and yeah, definitely. What your car, we had to give them the information, what car you're going in, what's the license plate, who you're going with, and we had to tell them everything about it, and they would tell us approved or disapproved.
Right.
So we could do that, and within the city, I will deny this if you repeat it. You're not taping me, are you? No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. You're supposed to do it when you go into a restaurant, but not everybody did that because you were out. Maybe you stopped at the market. You saw I'm hungry. I'm going to go in there and get a quick pizza or a quick Pakistani meal. So we would do that, and as long as you didn't stay there, the whole idea is not to linger because if you hang around for hours and hours and hours, people say, "Oh, there's a Westerner in there." So we were restricted, but again, in Islamabad, it's the safest city in Pakistan.
You say you
They-
probably traveled with someone else or people.
Well, sometimes. Since I had my own car, I stopped at the markets by myself a lot. That's how I kept my sanity.
Yeah.
I didn't, in order to keep from feeling so confined that I wouldn't just, I'm an exploring gypsy by nature, and it just killed me. I couldn't walk down the street. It just really killed me. So in order to balance it out, I would just drive and stop at the market on the way home and get some bananas, and then we just walk around the market a little bit, spend 20 minutes, half an hour, and then I would go home. And always being aware of what was going on around me, because the markets are where the bombers aim. That's where they want to. Where a lot of people congregate is what's going to attract the bomber, a suicide bomber, because that's the most impact. So, for example, on Saturdays, we could not go to the market. The markets were off limits to us on Saturdays because they were the most crowded on Saturdays. So we couldn't go there. We couldn't go to restaurants where there were more than 6 Americans already in there. And we weren't allowed to sit near windows because the windows cause the most damage and fatalities if there is an explosion. So we had things like that we had to abide by. Yes, sir?
Yes. You said this was a secular government. I would assume that although it's secular, the Muslim religion is supported by the government. And so my question is, are there any churches or synagogues?
Oh,
in
yeah.
Islamabad?
There actually are. A couple of the locals that I worked with were Catholics. And there were Methodists. There's a beautiful Catholic church in Islamabad. Beautiful church. And there are Methodists and there are Baptists. Yeah, you will find Christian churches all around. The middle class people are fine. The lower class people, the Christians, are somewhat persecuted. They are somewhat persecuted. But the people that I worked with were not. They were living as Christians pretty freely, actually. Yeah, that's a good question. But it's 95% Muslim, so. Yes, sir.
We hear a generally pessimistic view of the future of in Pakistan. To what degree do you see a mutuality of interests there that could provide hope?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. And as a representative of the government, the diplomacy aspect is really what I think will save things there. It's been tenuous. It's been very difficult going because there are a lot of people within the Pakistani government who just don't like us.